Has made her first public appearance since her split from Keith Urban.
We've been through a lot together.
We've got a timeline for it now, and the time is it's now.
For almost 20 years, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban were held up as the shimmering proof that Hollywood glamour and Nashville grit could beat every odd. To the world, they were the golden couple, an Oscar-winning actress with an ethereal presence and a country music star with fire in his voice, walking red carpets hand in hand as though nothing on earth could touch them. But while millions admired their love story from afar, something quieter and more painful was forming behind the scenes. Court documents eventually revealed what few dared to imagine, that Nicole had filed for divorce after 19 years, a decision insiders say she agonized over as she fought to keep the marriage alive. When Keith stepped onto a stage shortly afterward without his wedding ring, avoiding the songs he once dedicated to her, and altering lyrics that hinted at a revised past, it became impossible to ignore. The illusion had shattered, and with it came the first unfiltered glimpse into a story long overshadowed by fame and hope. To understand how they reached that moment, one must understand where they each began. Two dreamers shaped by wounds, ambition, and longing. Nicole Mary Kidman entered the world far from the spotlight, born in Honolulu in 1967 to Australian parents temporarily abroad. Her father, Anthony, was a clinical psychologist and biochemist, and her mother, Janelle, a nurse and advocate for women's education. When the family returned to Sydney, Nicole grew up in a household defined by intellect and discipline. But she was not the poised, commanding presence the world knows today. As a child, she was painfully shy. She flushed red whenever called upon in class, unable to face the eyes of her peers. Yet beneath the shyness lived a vivid inner world, one she could access only through performance. Ballet gave her an early sense of expressive freedom, and drama classes unlocked emotions she struggled to articulate. Youth theater became her refuge, where the timid girl transformed into someone capable of speaking truths she could not yet voice in real life. By her teens, her talent was unmistakable. Australia's film industry was on the rise, and Nicole seized every opportunity, landing roles in television projects before breaking through with the 1983 cult film BMX Bandits. Her porcelain features, expressive eyes, and surprising emotional reach caught Hollywood's attention. And soon she was swept into a world that would shape her future in ways she could never have foreseen. It was during this ascent that Nicole met Tom Cruise, a man who would alter her life in profound and complicated ways. They married in 1990, instantly becoming one of the most photographed couples of their era. The marriage brought her global fame and entry into Hollywood's inner circle, but it also carried a darker cost. Scientology, central to Tom's life, cast a long and often inscrutable shadow over their relationship. Nicole has rarely spoken openly about those years, but when their marriage ended in 2001, she did not just lose a partner, she lost almost all contact with their two adopted children. Isabella and Connor remained within the church, leaving Nicole relegated to the margins of their lives. Friends later described the heartbreak as one of the deepest wounds she had ever endured, a fracture in her identity as a mother. Yet from this pain emerged a steely resolve. When she later crossed paths with Keith Urban, she carried a longing to rebuild the sense of home and belonging she had lost. Keith Lionel Urban was born across the Tasman Sea in Whangarei, New Zealand, also in 1967. His family eventually settled in Queensland, where Keith grew into a boy both restless and hungry for escape. His father, Bob, managed a convenience store but lived and breathed country music. That passion became a lifeline for Keith, who picked up a guitar at 6 and quickly revealed a talent far beyond his years. Country music's raw stories of heartbreak and redemption became his language before he had the words to describe his own emotions. Yet despite the steady rhythm of music, his home life was marked by strain, financial tension, and emotional volatility. These early hardships planted seeds of insecurity that would follow him into adulthood. By his teens, he was performing anywhere that would have him. Talent shows, pubs, small venues, honing his craft and cultivating an image as the mysterious outsider with the smoldering stare. When he left school to pursue music full-time, it wasn't an act of bravado, it was necessity. There was no plan B. But with talent came demons. Drinking and substance use crept into his life early, and fame only escalated the storm. When Keith finally broke through in 1999 with his American debut album, he became the new heartthrob of country music. Yet beneath the glossy success, he lived in fear that his addictions would one day take everything from him. On the surface, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban seemed like opposites, Hollywood royalty and the untamed country star. But what truly bound them was not glamour or fame. It was shared vulnerability. Nicole carried the scars of heartbreak and a deep fear of losing family again. Keith carried a lifelong battle with addiction and a constant sense of instability. When they met, each saw in the other not perfection, but possibility. Nicole saw a tender fragility that awakened her protective instincts. Keith saw someone whose discipline and emotional strength could anchor him in ways he had never known. What neither fully understood was how the qualities that drew them together would also threaten to tear them apart. Her longing for structure clashed with his chaotic restlessness. His sensitivity complemented her resilience, yet also felt overshadowed by it. From the start, their bond held both the promise of healing and the seeds of tension. Their paths finally crossed at the G'day USA Gala in Los Angeles in January 2005, a glamorous celebration of Australians making their mark abroad. Nicole had rebuilt her life after the tumult of her divorce, standing tall as an Academy Award winner. Keith was riding the momentum of a Nashville career that was starting to explode. When they were introduced, she later admitted she assumed he wasn't interested. He was polite, even warm, but distant. And then he didn't call for months. That silence nearly ended their story before it began. But when he finally reached out, something clicked with startling force. Once the romance ignited, it moved fast. By spring, they were inseparable. Nicole described him as the man who swept her off her feet, someone who offered a kind of emotional freedom she hadn't felt in years. For Keith, she represented not just love, but legitimacy, an anchor in a life defined by turbulence. Their chemistry was undeniable, and soon the world embraced them as Australia's dazzling duo. In June 2006, little more than a year after their first date, they married in a candlelit ceremony in Sydney. Nicole entered the chapel in a Balenciaga gown, moving through the space like a figure carved from light, while Keith serenaded her at the reception, promising a lifetime of devotion. The guest list glittered with celebrities, but what was most striking was the intimacy of the moment. Two people who had both been battered by the past now stepping into a future that felt like salvation. For fans, it was the cinematic ending they had been waiting for. For Nicole and Keith, it was the beginning of a journey that would test them in ways neither anticipated. Reality intruded quickly. Just 4 months into their marriage, Keith checked himself into rehab after a relapse. It was a crushing blow to their newlywed bliss, especially for Nicole, who had believed love alone might be enough to quiet the storm inside him. The tabloids descended instantly, branding her a woman who had married a ticking time bomb. But Nicole chose loyalty. She visited him in rehab, shielded him from shame, and refused to abandon the marriage at its earliest test. Keith would later say that she saved his life. Yet insiders saw something more complex. A woman denied the chance to save her first marriage, now pouring everything into saving her second. It was devotion, but it was also a burden, one she would carry for years. Despite the rocky start, they forged ahead, crafting an image of a couple who had weathered darkness and found light on the other side. Nicole continued to anchor her career with bold, acclaimed roles, while Keith became one of country music's most decorated artists. Publicly, they praised each other with tears, with gratitude, with declarations that bordered on poetry. They implemented rules never to spend too long apart. They walked red carpets as though fused at the hip. When they welcomed daughters Sunday Rose in 2008 and Faith Margaret in 2010, Nicole leaned into motherhood with fierce devotion, determined not to lose another family. Keith adored the girls, yet struggled with balancing fatherhood and the relentless pull of touring. Photographs of them at airports, Nicole holding the girls while Keith trailed behind with suitcases, became symbols of a family that appeared both grounded and glamorous. But beneath the glossy facade, fractures deepened. Their careers kept them apart more than they preferred to admit. His battle for sobriety required vigilance that strained them both. Her need for stability sometimes collided with his craving for freedom. And yet they pressed on, investing energy into preserving the fairy tale the world loved. As they approached their first decade of marriage, the pressure intensified. Rumors trickled into tabloids. Arguments, long separations, whispers of Keith's old demons resurfacing. The couple publicly dismissed every story, often appearing arm in arm just days after speculation flared. They said they were stronger than ever. They said they were unshakable. But those closest to them sensed the truth. Nicole had grown weary of being the emotional anchor. Keith chafed against the feeling of being managed or monitored. Their love was real, but it was also exhausting. A cycle of rescuing, retreating, reassuring, and repeating. Their public image became a myth they felt compelled to uphold. The strain of maintaining that myth grew heavier each year. Their differing parenting styles quietly added strain. Nicole, shaped by the loss of her earlier children, believed in routine, boundaries, and shielding the girls from the chaos of fame. Keith leaned toward leniency, bringing spontaneity and laughter into their daughters' lives. While the girls thrived under both approaches, friends noted that Nicole sometimes felt undermined, while Keith felt judged. These weren't explosive fights. They were slow fractures, the kind that weaken a foundation one quiet moment at a time. As the 2020s unfolded, whispers of trouble returned with greater intensity. Stories hinted that they were living increasingly separate lives. Nicole attended events alone. Keith toured without his wedding ring. Interviews became noticeably careful, each avoiding questions about the other. Still, they pushed back against the narrative, saying marriage required work, saying they were devoted, saying the storms made them stronger. But their chemistry, the spark that once seemed unmistakable, began to look practiced, like actors performing roles they had memorized long ago. Tenderness remained, but it felt stretched thin, as though endurance had replaced passion. By 2023 and 2024, the distance between them had become difficult to hide. At times they appeared together, all smiles, but the warmth seemed muted. Friends described them as two people circling around the same unresolved conflicts, unable to bridge the emotional gap that had widened over nearly 2 decades. The tipping point came quietly in the summer of 2025. There was no dramatic betrayal, no explosive fight, only a shared, painful recognition that love alone was no longer enough. Nicole spent more time with her daughters, drawing strength from family and from work. Keith poured himself into his music, touring with an intensity that seemed equal parts passion and escape. When Nicole finally filed for divorce in late September 2025, the document cited irreconcilable differences. But those 3 words barely scratched the surface of a story built on devotion, wounds, and years of unspoken strain. The filing, submitted in Davidson County, Tennessee, was simple and understated, but its implications were immense. After 19 years, after 2 daughters, after a marriage praised as proof that love could conquer anything, Nicole was walking away. Those close to her said she agonized over the decision. She had given everything she had: loyalty, patience, forgiveness, stability. But at some point, she chose self-preservation. The divorce documents revealed she sought primary residential custody of their daughters while sharing decision-making authority with Keith. Both waived spousal and child support, suggesting their finances had long been independently maintained. It was a quiet, dignified ending on paper. But the world soon learned that not all endings stay quiet. Just days later, Keith Urban stepped onto a Pennsylvania stage for the first time since the announcement. The absence of his wedding ring spoke volumes, but it was his music that delivered the loudest statement. When he performed "You'll Think of Me," he altered the lyric "Take your space and take your reasons" into the pointed, stinging line, "Take your unreasonable reasons." The crowd gasped. It was a raw, emotional arrow aimed squarely at the heart of his unraveling marriage. During Heart Like a Hometown, images of him with Sunday and Faith played in the background, a bittersweet reminder of the family slipping through his fingers. And the omission of The Fighter, a song long tied to his love for Nicole, was unmistakable. The performance became its own public reckoning, a storm of grief, anger, nostalgia, and unresolved love presented under the glare of stage lights. Media outlets exploded with coverage. The golden couple had fallen, and suddenly everyone wanted to interpret the pieces. Some framed Nicole as the woman who had endured too much for too long. Others painted Keith as a tortured artist, undone by his own demons. His emotional performances fueled speculation. Her composed, quiet public appearances placed her in a different narrative, one of controlled heartbreak. At a film festival weeks later, Nicole appeared without her wedding ring. She smiled for cameras, but the sadness in her eyes told a different story. She had hoped for a private ending. Instead, she found herself once again navigating a spotlight she never asked for. At the center of everything were their daughters. The memory of losing Bella and Connor during her first marriage made this moment especially painful for Nicole. She was determined not to repeat that loss. The custody arrangement reflected her commitment to giving Sunday and Faith stability, even as their world shifted. Keith, for all his bravado on stage, was reportedly heartbroken. He loved his girls fiercely, but he knew the demands of his career could not offer the consistency they needed. Those close to him said his agreement was not resignation, but realism. In the weeks that followed, Nicole withdrew into the sanctuary of motherhood and work. She was seen in Nashville walking hand in hand with her daughters, her demeanor calm but fiercely protective. Emotional survival for her meant focusing on what she could hold close: her children, her craft, and her own healing. Keith, meanwhile, channeled his emotions into music. His concerts became catharsis, with moments of genuine heartbreak spilling into performances. Some nights he wept openly on stage, his vulnerability drawing both admiration and concern. Their love story, once idolized, had reached its conclusion. But in its ending, there was something undeniably human. Two people who had given each other nearly 20 years finally accepted what they could no longer fix. Their story was never just a fairy tale. It was a testament to the fragile beauty of connection, to the way love can lift, bind, strain, and ultimately break under the weight of its own contradictions. And now, as both step into separate futures, their shared past remains, complicated, cherished, painful, and unforgettable. What do you think of their divorce? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and if you'd like to explore more stories like this one, click the video on your screen, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the notification bell so you never miss a new release.